All right, this video is for the lesson 5.9 homework. We're still using our trig ratios, and this is just kind of a hodgepodge. Some of them we find angles, some of them we find sides, okay? So if we're looking for an angle, okay, so see how we've got X and Y, and they've got the degree symbol? Those mean we're looking for angles. We're going to use the inverse on any of them that we're finding the angles on. Okay, that was what we did yesterday, was the inverse. It's going to switch, though, because you've got two that are missing here. So you have to do a piece at a time and really kind of watch and stay on top of what you're doing. So let's do X first. Let's do this angle. All right, the 51.8, opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Hypotenuse. And that's not going to change. No matter what angle you're talking about, that side's going to stay the hypotenuse. In reference to angle X, side 35 here, adjacent or opposite? Adjacent. Okay. So our little mnemonic device here. So we have an A and an H. A and an H. So C stands for cosine. So the cosine of X, adjacent goes on top, hypotenuse goes on bottom. Okay, and then we can do the inverse. Okay. So, again, always check your calculator, Doc 72. Make sure it says degree. So, trig button, cosine inverse, 35 over 51.8. And we're rounding to the nearest tenth? Yes. And we get, so 47.49 would round to 47.5. Okay. I'm going to switch colors here, hopefully where it'll show up, to do Y. So when we find angle Y, is this 35? Is that still an adjacent side?
No.
What is it now? Opposite.
And then you're 51.
Okay, so if we have an O and an H, now we have to use sine. Okay, so in the same problem, we can use two different functions. So sine is opposite. Opposite is 35 over the hypotenuse. And then if we're looking for the angle, we can just do the inverse. Okay. So you got to keep track because those sides will change up depending on the angle. So be really, really careful with that. And then 42.50 is just going to be 42.5. Before I go any further with the angles, though, there's a shortcut. Okay, it's not always 100% accurate, but if you find one angle, right, and these are right triangles, which means this angle is always 90 degrees. What do we know about all three angles in a triangle?
180.
They add up to 180. So I could do minus 90, and then that first angle I find gives me my second answer. It's not always 100% accurate. Sometimes it's off by a little bit, a couple digits, but it's a hack for the angles. And it's a hack for the angles only. Okay? All right. So in this next one here, we got to find sides. Okay? So here's the angle we're given. So since we're only given one angle, that makes our life a little bit easier. The sides aren't going to change labels or anything like that. So 47.2, opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Opposite. And it's going to stay the opposite. Y is the hypotenuse. X is the adjacent. So let's do X first. So we're only focused on these two letters, O and A. O and A goes with tangent. So we would do the tangent of that angle measure. O comes first, so the opposite has to go on top. over the adjacent. When we're looking for a side, we have to do the menu 3-1. Okay, so the tangent of 45 equals 47.2 over, I use the A, O, and H instead of the X's just so I remember what side I'm working with. Comma A, we're rounding to the 10th, so that one did it for us, 47.2. Now to do the Y. So if this is opposite, this is adjacent, that means this one has to be the hypotenuse. I don't want to use the A. Okay? If we're solving a multi-step like this, we don't ever want to use a value that we solved for when we're trying to find a missing side. We always want to use what we're given, what the problem gives us, what the diagram gives us. So we have an O and an H here. O and H is sine. So I could do the sine of 45. O goes on top, so 47.2 over the hypotenuse. Again, if we're looking for a side, it's the menu 3-1. 47.2 divided by H. Whoa, H, comma H. And that one would round to 66.8. There is a hack for the sides, but I don't know that it's necessarily easier. Okay? So we've got a right triangle here. And so we know this one is 47.2, and then we solved for that one, and that one was 47.2. Oh, y'all can't see what I'm doing. Sorry. That's the one we just did. See if I can get them up there together. So this is a hypotenuse. We could use Pythagorean theorem. Same thing with the angle hack. It's not always 100% accurate. But we could plug these values in for A and B. So squared plus 47.2 squared equals C squared. Okay? So if I do that, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick it all underneath the square root and do it all at once. Plus, squared. 66.75 would round off. Like I said, I don't know if that's necessarily easier than just finding the other side, but it's another way that you can work through some of these. Okay? All right. Two angles. Okay? So angles are inverse. Anytime we have the angles, we're going to use the inverse. These are the ones where it's easy to get flipped around.
Teachers, please excuse this interruption. I have a quick announcement.
All right. So let's start with X. Here's angle X. So 18. Opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Which one is it? Adjacent. So then what's the 27? Opposite. Okay. So O and A is going to be tangent. Okay. Again, that little mnemonic phrase. So we can do tangent of angle X. O comes first, so the O has to go on top over 18. Again, if we're looking for the angle, we can just do the inverse. So trig, tangent inverse, 27 over 18. If we round, 56.3. So let's just try it here. Let's try the angle hack. So we know one angle is 56.3. We know the other angle is 90. So this one, let's see how close we get. Should be 33.7. Maybe spot on. So when we do angle Y, what happens to these two labels? They switch. Because in reference to angle Y, this is the, help if I knew my letters, opposite side. I do math, not letters. Okay, so pay attention to that because they'll switch. Those labels will switch, so be really, really careful. It's really easy to get twisted, okay? We still have O and A, which means we're still doing tangent. So the only thing that changes is who goes on top. 18 now goes on the top of the fraction. 27 goes on the bottom. Okay? They look really similar. If you start getting twisted and tangled, let me know. Let me help you. Okay? So 33.69, what does that round to? Okay. So I don't know. To me, that one's a pretty good little hack because it kind of saves some time. All right, let's do one more with sides because to me, these are the tougher ones, the ones with the missing sides. So here's my angle, 41. So the 25.6, opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Hypotenuse. So what's the x? Adjacent, and that means that's opposite. So at least the labels are going to stay the same. So x is an A. I can't use that O at all. There's no value there. There's nothing. I can't use that one. So A and H is cosine. So cosine of the angle is adjacent, which is x, over the hypotenuse. And so if you need that little note to remember, anytime we're finding the sides, we use the menu 3-1. All right, so cosine of 41 equals x divided by 25.6, comma x. 19.32 would be 19.3. I found the x, so I don't want to use that adjacent side anymore. Because remember, we try not to.
So then you could do a squared plus b squared.
You could,
Oh.
or what else could I do? So I could do Pythagorean, but what else could I do? What do O and H go with? Sine. So I could do the sine of the angle, opposite, which is y, over the hypotenuse. And it would be the menu 3-1 equals, that doesn't look right, y over 25.6. Round to what, 16.8? Yeah. All right, so those are the only ones I'm going to work on this sheet because they're all the same. You're either finding the two missing angles or you're finding the two missing sides, okay? You do